Welcome to First Things First. I'm Brooke, my pronouns are she and her.
I'm Matty Mills, my pronouns are he and him. And before we get started, we'd like to acknowledge the custodians of the land on which we record. And for me, that's the Gadigal People of the Eora Nation.
And for me, that's the Wurundjeri people of the Eora Nation. All right, Matty, let's
get
go.
into it.
Us talking about synthesizing before?
Yeah, well, I have this sort of battle in my mind whether I'm in the sun because my partner constantly wears SPF 50 plus, and even today I'm talking it is Armageddon outside, and I was leaving the house and he was like, "Do you have your SPF 50 on?" And I'm like, "Have you looked outside?" He's like, "The sun still comes out." I'm like, as black fellas, yes, we need to be like conscious of being out in the sun and, taking care of our skin because, of melanoma and skin cancer, but I feel like you put it into perspective. It's like, it's not tanning for us, is it?
No, I don't think it's tanning. I feel like it's just like, again, synthesizing where it's like you're absorbing all the vitamin D. Like we're so used to the sun. I mean, in Carnarvon, right, I was like out in 35-degree heat every day. Like we had like one little box aircon, which, we used to wet the filter so then the cool air would funnel through like literally like a thing like I don't even know how big, like this book size. This is the vent, tiny. And we used to all huddle around this aircon in the house and close everything up and like put curtains up to like get away from the heat. And now I'm like in Melbourne and I'm like chasing the heat.
Did you ever as a kid have your family water the house with a hose?
Hell yeah.
To cool the house down? Like if you were to describe that to someone, they would think we're cuckoo. But like, did you ever have like the mesh awning and then you would spray it with the hose, which would cool the veranda down?
Yep. My nana used to make us do that all the time.
Water restrictions.
She'd have all her beautiful plants. I know.
I was thinking of how many houses do you think that you lived in as a kid? Because I was thinking about how many schools I went to, how many homes I lived in this week, and there was way too many to count. I would say we moved every year during my childhood, and some of it was because we were evicted, but some of it was because we had a massive house fire when we were little and my mum's hair literally burnt off. So like my mum saved my brother's life from the top bedroom, and as she was coming down the stairs, all of her hair caught on fire and literally like just basically burnt all her hair off. And
oh my God.
Everything in that house was destroyed. So we had no baby photos, no memories that were like tangible memories. Everything was gone. And there's still to this day, we don't know how it happened, but supposedly my younger brother was playing with matches. But I don't think mum told the fire brigade that,
Oh, God. I wrote this story about it in my book, actually, which is so funny. My sister and I like dabbling into, lighting fires, and my girlfriend actually wrote a book it's called Burn, and it's about a young boy, playing with fire and something really bad happening. And it's crazy to think like that was something that we dabbled in as like a way of like keeping ourselves amused. If my kid is playing with fire, if my like children are playing with matches, like they're getting clipped around the ears.
Oi, 100%. I think it's too dangerous. The term, don't play with fire. I think that as kids, though, you do try and test the boundaries. And I think playing with fire was something that we did as kids as well. But also, what we did as kids a lot, me, my brothers and I, we would go, this sounds terrible. And see, I hate telling these stories because if you think about this now, it sounds really bad. But we used to go around to the rich neighborhoods and take some of their garden ornaments and then go and sell them for $1 or $2 to the poor people so that the poor people could feel like they had garden ornaments. Instead of paying $20, we would get $1 or $2. We even, as kids, used to fish in this local duck pond, catch the turtles and then sell the turtles to people. Like, is that not entrepreneurship? Like,
I was going to say, it's business.
We were business kids. We were trying to get a feed, seriously. And I just remember we used to go, and it used to be like really ugly little gnomes. But then we would find some really precious old lady who would give you $2.50 for a gnome, you know, feeling totally sorry for you. But I mean, it's now that I look back on it, I'm like, wow, like how did we get away with that? Did we just walk into the garden and take the ornaments? Yes, we did. And how were the police not caught? I don't know. The days of just trying to hustle to find a feed, crazy, right? You think about it now, it's like, oof, wild.
It's kind of like, it is survival. Like it is a survival mentality. Like when you're a kid in, you know, those communities, you grow up pretty quickly. And I guess like you have to sort of like fend for yourself. So you're thinking of ways of like, what can I do to like get money, or like what way can I get food, or what way can I get like safety, really? Like I talk to about it all the time. Like safety is a thing. And, you know, and sometimes, well, as a kid, like you actually don't really have like a good radar of safety by then. Like it hasn't quite developed yet. Like unless you're like, I guess, you know, probably switched on similar to you and I, like we, you know, well, we know sort of what's right and what's wrong.
Yeah.
But even those, you know, you say that these things are so wrong, like now, like looking back, you're like, oh, well, but at that time, that was like the norm.
Yeah, it was normal in our world.
Exactly. Like it was just what we did. Like I don't know. I was just thinking when I went back home this Christmas or just last Christmas, me and my cousin Jamie's caught up, and I haven't seen her for years, right? And she goes, oh, do you remember that time we used to play in this tunnel? And I was like,
tunnels?
Oh,
how dangerous. It's so funny that you bring tunnels up, because when I was talking to you about the going around stealing the gnomes and ornaments, I was picturing us boys in the tunnels. We used to do the same thing.
That, for me, when she brought up that memory, like I got like kind of goosebumps, like because I pictured the house, I pictured what I was wearing, I pictured like who was with me. I just like, it's like I went back in time and I was placed back in this memory, and I was like, holy shit. So we had this massive like empty block that was like fenced, right? And we used to like climb the fence to get over into this like massive block, or there was like this little hole in the fence that we created basically to get in. Yeah. And so basically it was a massive ditch, right? So it was just like, imagine like just like a block of land, and it was just like a ditch. So like kind of like a miniature Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
Not as big, obviously. A small version.
But as a kid, that lot would have looked big to you.
It was. Yeah. And down to the side was this tunnel. And this tunnel used to go under the road and over to the nature reserve park, like we're right next to our house because the block was across the road. And we used to crawl through that fucking thing with spiders, cockroaches,
rubbish,
God
glass.
knows what else is in there.
Yeah.
God knows what else was in there.
A
and
clown.
Just be like, oh my God, like challenge. Yeah, don't. Challenge accepted, but like absolutely not. No, it ain't there.
Ooh.
It ain't it.
Well, I remember one time when we were playing in the tunnels, and these tunnels were big water tunnels. So when our area flooded, these tunnels sort of funneled the water, but they were underground. And I remember when it used to sort of get to a midpoint flood, where the 4 big tunnels came out, became like a bit of like a lake. And so we used to swim in there. Yeah. And like thinking back now, it would have been disgusting. But like you're 7, 8 years old, and you're on an adventure of a lifetime, and you think it's the coolest thing. But you don't think that if this water rises and you're in the tunnels, you're gone. Your life is over. And we had just didn't comprehend the dangerous nature of it. But also, outside of those tunnels, our world was dangerous anyway. We lived in rough neighborhoods. We grew up in poverty. Yeah. So, our world was harsh anyways. It didn't really feel that out of the realm of danger for us. But I remember one day my brothers and I, we didn't want to go to school. So we jigged school. And we were in the tunnels, and my brother slid down one side of the tunnel and cut his bum. So he's on a glass bottle, and it was just bleeding, like full on bleeding. So I took my school shirt uniform off and I wrapped it around him. And like, we were too scared to go and tell any adults what had happened. So we just stayed in the tunnel all day holding the shirt on his bum, which was like gashed. And I think that's where my fear of blood comes from, because I was holding this shirt, which was then full of blood. And like, by the end of the day, we had to go home and tell, our mum and the lady that we were living with what happened. But it just, as little kids, like you just have these crazy adventures. And I feel like for us in our world, it's like pretty normal.
Well, you're actually so right. Like, I never actually thought of it like that, as in, like, our world was already dangerous at home. So, like, no wonder we dabbled into, like, risk behavior. Like, no wonder we weren't afraid to, like, kind of challenge ourselves in that sense. Like, when you brought up the lake kind of filling up, like, I was just picturing the times when we would go down to what we used to call the Lewin.
Yeah.
And the current would be flowing and we would basically jump into the current, like jump into the Lewin and let the current take us and then grab onto a branch and pull ourselves in, because basically they had all these hanging branches off the banks, and we used to just let the current be like, woo, like let the current take us and then just grab a stick and then pull ourselves up, run back and do it again. And
would you let your child do that?
Absolutely
not. Absolutely not.
I'm wrapping that kid in bubble wrap.
Yeah, putting big floaties on every limb.
Exactly. But, you said also like your trigger of blood comes from that time. And I think there's like these little memories that both of us probably have that do trigger a few things. Like I know that my phobia of vomit definitely comes from my childhood. I think the reason why I don't really drink and do drugs is because of my childhood.
Yeah.
And I think I also have a fear of like getting sick. So like I went the opposite way.
Yeah.
As much as I like, dabbled into some risk behavior, it's also peer pressure. Like your brothers and your sister, used to get you like pumped up and like ready to go.
Totally.
So like I went the other way, but far out.
Triggers for me, like one thing that I haven't been able to get over is my fear of needles. And that comes down to a very, sad moment in my childhood where I and my brother found my mum overdosed on drugs, and the needle was still in her arm when we found her. So she was on the toilet and she had her pants around, her ankles and a needle in her arm, and we found her overdosed. And it was one of us ran next door and one of us ran to my mum's best friend and got an ambulance, and, and she was able to be brought back. But I still can't go and get blood without like the fear of fainting. And I fainted basically my whole life up until recently, where I went and got a blood test, and the lady just sort of gently approached the situation and was like, okay, we're going to do like a meditation and a breathing exercise where we're going to get you through this without fainting. And she was able to get me past that. So I feel like, we get these massive triggers and these massive moments of, I don't know, just, triggers from our childhood, but there's ways to sort of move past them. And I'm only figuring out some of them now.
Oh, well, this is the good thing, like not getting like too deep, because that experience for you would have been absolutely traumatizing.
Oh, yeah.
And would have left some serious trauma on your social and emotional well-being. Like we all know that, between the ages of like 0 and 8, you develop your core values, but during that time as well, like you hold on to past life traumas.
Yeah.
When we talk about safety, like in those moments, like I think when we're in a moment of like, say like triggered, or like, I don't know what the word would be, but like we're of maybe say like a over heightened state. So like we panic, we revert back to our younger selves.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Like, so when you're like, fuck, like I'm getting blood. Because I actually do the same thing. I actually have to lay down taking blood. Like, I thought I was the only strange person.
Trust me,
I have some way that I was like, I can't do it.
I have to lay down, headphones on, looking at YouTube, literally like distracted over here. Like, it's a whole ordeal. And I explained it to my last doctor and the nurse, and she said, well, we're not going to do that today. We're going to do something else because I want you to get past this. And she got me through it. It was great. But I do that. I've done that all my life.
Oh, it's like, sorry, and I didn't mean to laugh, but like, it's so funny because I do the exact same thing. And I was like, and I have a different lady all the time because I go to different doctors, but like they never know the depth of what is behind that. And I think that's the thing, like you never know what's going on for people and the reason why they have a phobia or a trauma or they're in a triggered space. Like you just have to sort of ride that wave with them. But I lay down and I panic all the time. But I think the other day, I don't know if I actually told you this, talking about like things that trigger you and something that I really want to get over, and I've spoken about this all the time, is the fear of vomiting. But like I left studio last week when we were recording and I walk out of the Nova studio and I see a guy just like belting, like vomiting, like all on the pavement, like honestly, like 20, 30 meters in front of me. Yeah. In that moment, my brain could not function. It just went, like I just turned and I just started fast pacing, walking away. Wow. But the panic, my whole body went over, like the feeling of like, it just like froze. And I was like, I just clicked of what was happening and I just turned and like ran away. And that was like, this is how I need to like deal with it. But that is probably the most traumatizing thing for me to happen, is like that right in front of me. Yep. And I could hear it and I could at least like see it and I could smell it. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's where I just like can't deal. And it happened so quickly that I was like, okay, I really need to get like exposure therapy or do something about this because it's just like taking over my whole life.
How does one get exposure therapy to vomiting?
It's like CBT. It's like it's cognitive behavioral therapy, and that's what you do with a therapist. Is like you go back to where it happened, so where the trauma happened, and you put yourself back into that younger self, which I don't want to. I'm like completely avoidant of it. I do not want to fucking go back there again. Yeah. Because there's so many memories like of home, and it's not like I'm avoidant. I'm ready to face it, but at the same time, there's so many layers to it. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't just like end at that one memory or that one trauma. Like there's so much to it that I'm just like, fuck, I really need to get over this. Like I sometimes like when I'm unwell, like I'm a different person.
Yeah, because you're so worried about vomiting.
Yeah, it's like the whole panic like takes over my whole body that I become like an absolute shell of myself. I just cannot function. I'm distraught. Like I've never been even like that, like at funerals. You know what I mean? Like I'm a different version when I'm like in that kind of mindset, and it's so unhealthy. So bad.
When you go home, do you get triggered just from being around familiar family members and like having conversations with mob about certain things? Because for me, when I go home to Tamworth, as much as I love being back on country and I love being with my family, there's like nothing like that feeling. But there's also the flip side to that. And there's a lot of heaviness that comes with it. And I always think about how they operate within that heaviness of that world that I feel when I'm in it. I'm like, how do they function being so heavy? Because it feels like the trauma from our childhood hasn't been lifted and it still weighs them down. And like, I think it has a lot to do with environment, but also like the fact that they haven't been able to experience much outside of the realm of like their own town or own small community, you know? Like it really, it plays on my mind a lot because I don't want my nieces and nephews to have to go through that. I want to be able to like be a safer place for them and be a spot where they feel light and they don't have to feel that heaviness of trauma.
This really hits home for me because I had this over Christmas. Just
yeah, we were texting. We were yarning, remember? We were like, 4 days in, Dal.
I know. And we're like, somebody help us. You know, I really look forward. I work really hard throughout the year to make my family's Christmas really special. Like, I take all the financial burden off them. I fly them in or fly them out, like whatever I need to do. Like, I just make it happen. And my family really appreciate it. I know that they do, but there's another side of that, you know, I don't just do that because I wanted to create more traditions in my family that we didn't have when we were younger. So it's about breaking that cycle and about breaking, you know, and I want more good memories to overweigh the shit memories so that we can sit with each other. We don't have to reminisce about the past. So we can reminisce about more recent times. And I do that, like, you know, intentionally, but it's really hard sometimes. And I know you probably get this, and I think a lot of other mob will probably understand that, is that some mob are just so stuck with being in the past. Sometimes it does weigh on them. And I experienced that with my oldest brother. Yeah. Now, my oldest brother has been through more than I can imagine. We're 4 years apart, so he's 4 years older than me. Yeah. And I've always felt like I'm the big sister to him. And everyone else knows that that's kind of the scenario where he's not the big brother in the family. It's usually like it's me, the matriarch. Yeah. And, you know, I kind of like I hate the word rule, but like I kind of a little bit like a conductor. Like you know, I do all the moving parts so that I could get my family together and make it happen. But my brother is he's very introverted, but he's a very deep thinker and he's in his own head, and he sometimes like just like wants to do what he wants to do and no one else is considered in that. And I can kind of get like a little bit narky about it because I'm like, there are so many other people that I'm thinking about. I'm not just thinking about you. And he just thinks about himself, and he doesn't mean to project it, but it affects everyone in the family. And sometimes coming around Christmas where it is about everyone and it's about family and it's about thinking about each other, he just can bring like the whole mood down. Yeah. And this was a huge challenge for me because it does trigger moments back home when, you know, he used to like, you know, really like I wouldn't say neglect me, but like he would just like do these things that would like intentionally hurt me or like make me feel like shit when we were younger. And it just felt like he knows that everything is like good and stuff now, that he tries to like do that. And it's quite manipulative, but it's just like it's so much deeper than that. And I mean, you get this. Like when you go back home, it just like, and then when you're with your family again, it just sparks so many different things. But you just try to recreate new memories and just give them a bit different perspective and a different like way of showing like how, you know, how you should act, but you know, you can't control that either. Like, does that make sense? Like,
yeah. I feel like
I kind of went on a tangent, but
no. I totally get it. I feel like when I go home, there's a lot of sort of things that come to the surface, and I think that naturally you and I are problem solvers, and sometimes we can swing into what are the resolutions and how do we try and help people and how do we try and save a situation. But something about it is like going through therapy and understanding that we can't save the day, and also people are who they are, and whether they're family or not, they have to make their own choices and they have to be able to live with the choices they make. Because something I get frustrated about is the fact that I get to do what I love, and I really find that what I do in my career is the thing for me that gets me through life, because I'm waking up and I get to do and participate in my dreams and make them come true, but also do the thing that I'm meant to be doing. I know that what I'm doing is my passion and it's what I'm good at and what I'm supposed to be doing. What makes me frustrated is when I think about mob back home who aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing in terms of like they don't have the big vision for dreams, or they don't have, I suppose, their job, which is their passion.
Aspirations?
Yeah, and it's hard for them.
Yeah.
And I feel like sometimes I feel guilty because if I was home, and I know this, especially now because my dad is unwell, right? So I know that if I was at home, that I act as a glue for my family, and that a lot of things that are an issue back there, I could help with. But you can't sacrifice your happiness totally for for your family or your mob. You have to sort of find a balance. And at the moment, my dad isn't well, and he's really needing to move in with either one of my brothers. So it's got to the point now where he can't be by himself. He has to either live with my younger brother or my older brother. And they already have like their lives. They're holding a lot of weight, a lot of trauma, and a lot of, personal issues themselves. So like it's frustrating for me because I feel like I got my shit together, but the answer isn't to move home and fix all the issues, because then my life will end up the same as theirs, which isn't bad. It's just they're not as happy and as thriving as I would like to see them. And I think that because, one, they haven't done much work to get out of that sort of survival state. They've been in that for a lot of their lives. I feel like when you move out of that, it's environmental. If you're away from it, it doesn't affect you as much. But as soon as I go home, I'm like, it literally only takes a couple of days and I feel so heavy. I feel like I don't want to get up out of bed.
Same.
I feel like I don't want to do things that are good for me, like work out. I feel like I turn into like a completely different person, and it's that weight of the trauma that lives in that world that is just eating people up. My big thing is I need to, my nieces and nephews get into an age now where I can have really good impact on them. I don't know if I can do much for my brothers or my dad, but my nieces and nephews and the next generation, I feel like I can have influence on. I feel like I can broaden the spectrum of what they think is possible and bring them in and like bring them out of that trauma. And it's hard though, because, spending time on country and back home, it does fill your cup, but it also empties your spirit sometimes. It's tough to be in that space.
It does. It's like a double-ended sword.
Yeah.
It's because you've seen a life out of it and you know what life can be. And I think, you're so right with, understanding that young people are our next generation and they're so malleable and they can evolve and they can change.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that our older generation can't, but it's more of a challenge when someone just like is stuck. Exactly. And I believe that people can change and people make choices and people can wake up and they can make a different choice every day. And I think like that's exactly how I feel sometimes going home too. And I think a lot of other mob would understand that when you've seen a life outside your circumstance. Like I didn't want to have a life within my own environment. I didn't want to do drugs. My household growing up wasn't the most positive, and I'm very open about that. Like I don't fucking, hide away from the details because that's part of my story. And as much as I'm, it has had an impact on me, sometimes negatively, I use it in a more positive way about showing people that there is a life beyond that. And I think that's all you can really do as Matty is show your nephews and nieces and younger mob that there is a life beyond circumstance and you can have it all. Like you can create it for yourself. Like you said, if there's not a door, create one yourself. Fucking build a thing. Like
100%.
I think I feel that burden sometimes. Like my brothers have had a really tough life and I've had to make some really tough choices with one even not talking to them for a year, one of them for a year because he was hurting me by his choices and decisions. And that was something that it's called boundaries. You put these boundaries up, even if they're mob and family. Yeah. You have to have boundaries with your family sometimes because otherwise you get, your social emotional well-being gets, kind of interrupted and disrupted. And so, I think it's a very normal, healthy thing to do as a human to understand what you need to do, what you can do for others, and what other people's choices that they need to make for their life. If they are happy with that and that's what they want to do, let them do it.
Yeah.
You know, I have this saying, or just let them. Like, you know, you can say, oh, this is how you do things. One breakthrough that I had, though, going home with my brother, which was actually really special, is my brother, you know, like can be very like in his ways. And I accept that. Like that's, we literally just say, like I always have arguments with my other brother. I'm like, he's just so negative. But my other brother goes, that's just Eden. That's just Eden. And I love him. Like we love him to bits. Like I wouldn't do anything, you know, there's nothing that I wouldn't do for him. But this April, you know, for Christmas, I booked him I gave him like a card with an IOU to fly him over to Melbourne to go to the Essendon Anzac match here. And I had never seen him smile that big in my life. And I know, like, you know, money can sometimes, like, you know, be really helpful in these situations. But even regardless of money, like, seeing my brother smile at something was just, like, a huge breakthrough for me because there's not a lot that he smiles about.
Oh, well, you know what? It just figure it. You figured it out. It's footy. You figured it out. You got him to the footy game.
Footy and
small, you know, the little things in life.
This is what reminds me.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. You got to find common ground. You got to find commonalities and things that there's something in them that can just like, you know, like spark. It's like a little
I've been searching.
Flower, you know?
You know what? Let me tell you about common ground. I've been searching for things that my dad will come to, right? So when I first moved to my dad's and he took us out of foster care, you know what one DVD he had? The Pink concert. Pink! My dad, like 55-year-old black fella, loves Pink. It's like his number one artist, right? So guess what? I thought, you know what? Pink's coming. I've got the connections. Send a little text. Great. Got my dad tickets, really good tickets to the Pink concert. Get on the phone. Dad, you won't believe it. I'm going to take you to Pink. You think this fella's going to leave Tamworth to see Pink? No. Like this, I thought that I had found the best ticket in the world for this man and still can't get him to come to Sydney. Like he's real old fella, make up any excuse. I know he's not that well, but like, I'll come and pick you up and put you in the car and you'll be right, you know? Like, I just haven't been able to get him along. But thinking of common ground, I've been trying to invite like family along to things because I feel like I want them to be more a part of my world. But you know what's so funny? Things that we find exciting, they don't find exciting. I'm hosting this really cool thing and it's like really big deal. Great. Awesome. Well done. But they're not excited.
They real humble you, eh? Like,
they humble you.
Real excited
you're like,
about
Dad,
things.
you would not believe who called me and asked me to host something. He's like, yeah, that's cool. I'm like, what? Like, be excited. Pretend. Like, I think that maybe, you know, like finding common ground, I'm glad you're able to find it with your brother, but I still haven't been able to find it with mine. I don't know what's going to excite them. Actually, I feel like if I took my dad like to the Bulldogs training ground or something, like the doggies, he probably would.
Yeah, see, that's what I mean. Footy is like life. Yeah. This is the thing. Everyone thinks like, you know, you kind of get put on this like pedestal with like, oh, you know, Brooke, First Nations bachelorette, you know, she's connected to culture and land and da-da-da. And I'm like, yeah, my family is like amazing. Like, I think they're such a beautiful bunch, but they humble you really quickly. Like my brother once goes, why do you have to talk so white?
Oh,
He goes, why do you put that voice on?
Oh my gosh. You know what? I'm
like, fuck you.
I've heard that before. Don't you worry. Once I was too white, then I was too black. I don't know what I am anymore. Like, you know what I am? I am who I am, and I always will be. So just accept me for me.
Exactly.
Sometimes I sound real posh and sometimes I sound like I'm sitting on the river with my family, and that's okay.
Exactly. Well, at the end of the day, what is it? No matter how much milk you add to your tea, you still tea.
Yeah. And that's the tea.
Exactly.
That's all we have time for today. Thanks for listening to First Things First. If you love us, leave us a 5-star rating and a little review.
And honestly, if you want us to cover anything on the pod, we're always really open about that. Reach out to our socials. My handle is at Brooke.Blurton and Matty's handle is at It's Matty Meals. And we'll see you next week.
See you, Maud.
Bye.
Bye.